I'll tell you why the University of Missouri says it's safe for a full return. This is KOMU 8 News at 9.
If you go to the ATM to withdraw some cash,
When it spits the money out, you notice there's an extra $100. Now you got that money through no fault of your own, but the bank, and in this case the state, is going to want that money back. The pandemic has moved those meetings online, but parents still can't press that record button. They'll only have their notes and the IEP document to review how their child should be progressing. But once you get the bigger picture, they are everywhere, and some are even starting to lose their petals. Their presence means all of the natural grasses in this clearing are hurt. It could mean even more potholes like these in the days to come. We had to do a little math, but by our calculation, only about 45% of Missouri's senior population has received their first dose. The university says the timing of the return is key, but since the pandemic started, they've had to move the cold cots into the cafeteria. He praised the state government's work to fight the virus with a balanced approach, but he made little mention of the state's COVID-19 vaccination plan. That's under updated restrictions that start on Friday. Mayor Brian Treese says restrictions can start to roll back because cases are down.
Workers and volunteers are making progress on restoring a Callaway County church. It's one of the 2 historically black churches vandalized in Callaway County in a span of 3 months. Prosecutors charged 4 teenagers for vandalizing Mount Vernon Missionary Baptist Church back in November. KOMU 8's John Jenco shows us how the church is picking up the pieces.
The bullet holes are still visible in the door of Mount Vernon's old chapel, but inside, Pastor Gordon Coleman says everything is removed so crews can see if damage is more than cosmetic.
It may take us 3 months, because you don't know what else was vandalized. Electric, plumbing, stools were completely demolished.
Judy Coleman Hargrove has been a member for 70 years. She says vandalism is nothing new.
We would come in on Sundays and the windows would be shot out.
Coleman Hargrove was hit especially hard when Oakley Chapel, a historically black church in nearby Tebbets, was vandalized in January. The church is no longer active, but Coleman Hargrove says the 2 were sister churches back in the day.
We used to sing at that church. We used to go and sing at their basket dinners and things at that church.
None of the vandals charged in either case are suspected of hate crimes. Reverend Coleman says he's not going to dwell on the question of if it's a hate crime.
The victim can only ponder and wonder, what was that? We're wasting a ton of time wondering what to call it, when all we got to do is get back to what we was doing and go forward.
Services have been online, but Coleman Hargrove wants to come back once it's safe.
I don't want to have the fear of not being able to go anymore, So hopefully something will be done that at least send a message that they can't continue to do these things.
Reverend Coleman says the main priority moving forward is installing new security cameras and lighting. In Holt Summit, John Jenco, KOMU 8 News.
The Missouri Department of Conservation is trying a new program in Columbia to stop the state's fastest spreading plant. KOMU 8's John Jenco tells us about that plant and the unusual tactic the department is resorting to.
Pyrus calleriana, the Callery pear tree, is considered an invasive species in Missouri. Developers started planting the trees in the 80s. It originally came from China. Department of Conservation Forester Ann Koenig says the spread wasn't noticed until recently.
Around 10 years ago, experts started noticing a few of the Callery pear in fields, and it has just exponentially grown.
But the trees can hurt native plants.
The trees look harmless with their white blossoms that come out in the spring, but once you get the bigger picture, they are everywhere, and some are even starting to lose their petals. Their presence means all of the natural grasses in this clearing are hurt.
The spread occurs when the trees produce pears later in the season. The seed is then spread by birds. The department is now bringing its pear tree buyback program to Columbia to encourage people to remove their pear trees.
We will give you a free native tree to plant back in that space.
Michael Weil owns a tree removal business in Columbia. He says the removal of these trees is a multi-step process.
It's going to try to regrow. I mean, that's a given. It's going to try to come back.
Weil says full removal also requires grinding down the stump and using a type of tree herbicide. In Columbia, John Jenco, KOMU 8 News.
Missouri lawmakers will consider a bill next legislative session, and it would let parents of students with disabilities record special education meetings. Most parents currently cannot record those meetings because most districts use a school board association policy. KOMU 8's John Jenco talked with parents who say the legislation would help them better understand their child's education.
House Bill 228 would let parents record their child's IEP or 504 meetings. It's the same legislation that passed in the House last session but ran out of time in the Senate. Michelle Roboto is a board member for Missouri Disability Empowerment.
She says the individualized education plan and 504 meetings set goals and accommodations for special needs students.
Everything about that child's education is around that IEP. So they're both extremely important documents.
The meetings can take up to 6 hours to complete and can have more than a dozen teachers and specialists present. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education says over 132,000 students required IEP meetings last year, about 14% of the student population.
The pandemic has moved those meetings online, but parents still can't press that record button. They'll only have their notes and the IEP document to review how their child should be progressing.
Tara Arnett schedules IEP meetings for her son Logan, who has autism. Logan attends in-person class right now because he is nonverbal. Arnett says having an IEP recording would help her son's new teacher as he moved into middle school this semester.
She could look back and say, okay, what were we doing last year? Because his teacher from last year may not remember.
She says a recording would contain valuable conversations about how her son is doing in school and at home.
Those conversations don't make it to the document. They happen and they help guide the document.
Arnett says she's hopeful HB 228 will pass in the spring.
CPS says it supports a statewide law. Most CPS parents can't record those meetings, but I did find a workaround while researching this story. Only those with a disability under the ADA can record, if they request that at least 3 days before the meeting. The parents and officials I talked to want to see the bill pass so every parent can have that opportunity. In the newsroom, John Jenco, KOMU 8 News.
We have a new video showing a CPD officer pulling a gun on a bystander after responding to a 911 call. Today, KOMU 8's John Jenco talked to the woman who filmed the scene.
Columbia police are shown detaining Jerica Owens last Friday night, just after 7 p.m. Jacqueline Watts arrived in a car with James McDaniel Jr. and Owens just minutes before. Watts starts filming on Facebook Live after Owens is put in handcuffs and struggles with officers.
They pulled the girl's hair out. It's in the street, still.
One of the officers notices something off camera, which prompts Officer Sean Claypool to point his gun at McDaniel. Watts says she didn't see what McDaniel was doing.
I was trying to keep up with what was going on with her.
Officer Claypool indicates that he saw McDaniel reaching into the car.
You just put the gun out on me, bro. You're reaching in the car, man. I don't know.
Claypool keeps the gun pointed at McDaniel for almost 30 seconds. Watts says she feared someone was going to get hurt.
I didn't know if he was going to be shot or I was going to be shot, or if both of us were going to be shot.
The police department said in a press release that Owens was the suspect in an assault investigation involving a gun. The release says Owens resisted arrest. The press release does not mention the officer pulling out his weapon. Officers said they searched the car after the incident and found no firearm. Watts says she did not know Owens was under investigation, which led to confusion after Owens was detained. Watts thinks the officers should have better communicated the situation.
Talking to people goes a long way. Not going in with their guns drawn goes a long way.
Owens was charged with third-degree assault and resisting arrest.